If you've ever felt invisible in a room full of noise or watched someone else walk away with what you built, then this story is for you. I could feel the cold edge of the ceramic mug pressing into my fingertips, the bitter scent of stale coffee rising in the still air. The clock above the doorway marked the hour with soft, measured ticks, each second an echo in the hollow of my chest. My heart thudded once, twice, as if it too needed time to catch up with the impossible truth. I was back. 3 years ago, in this office that had once been a cage and a crucible. I sat breathing in the stale air that smelled of ambition and quiet despair. The papers on my desk were a familiar landscape. Neat stacks of white that once held all my hopes, all my quiet desperation to be seen. My fingers trembled as they traced the lines of text, the words that had once been my offering and my undoing. This isn't a dream, my mind whispered it again and again, as if repetition would anchor me to the truth. The taste of betrayal was fresh on my tongue, as sharp and metallic as blood. Anul's laughter drifted from the corner of the room, low and smooth like the stroke of a velvet blade. His voice had always been a soft promise of power, wrapping itself around my throat with every carefully chosen word. I let the mug fall back to the table, the sound a muted thud that seemed to settle into the hush of the office. My reflection in the dark screen of my computer stared back at me, eyes wide, lips parted, the ghost of the woman I had been. She was still there in the tremor of my hands, but deeper now, beneath the skin, was something harder, something that refused to be broken again. This is my chance. I will not waste it. The thought coiled in my chest, warm and fierce, a quiet defiance that tasted like hope and fury. My fingers hovered over the keyboard, every word I typed a small act of rebellion. I wrote in silence, crafting the proposal that had once been stolen from me, each line a blade I would wield with precision. I worked until the first faint light of dawn pressed against the window, painting the glass in pale gold. My real proposal lay in front of me, every detail honed and unassailable. It was my voice, unbroken and unwavering. Next to it, I laid the decoy, a copy that looked the same to any hurried glance, but beneath the surface were careful gaps, threads pulled loose that only I could see. I heard the soft click of polished shoes on the floor before I saw him. Hanel's shin moved like he always had. Measured steps, a tailored jacket draped carelessly over his arm, the faint smile that never reached his eyes. His gaze swept the office, lingering on me as if he expected me to flinch. "You're here early," he said, his tone warm and indulgent. He leaned against the doorway, his sleeves rolled up to reveal the glint of expensive cufflinks that caught the morning light. "Burning the midnight oil, Yuna?" I met his gaze steadily, my voice calm. There was work that needed to be done. My tone was quiet, almost deferential, though every word tasted like steel on my tongue. He didn't notice. Or perhaps he thought the silence was submission, the same way he always had. His eyes flicked to the proposals on my desk, and he pushed himself upright with a fluid grace that spoke of confidence born from years of unchallenged power. He reached for the decoy draft, his fingers brushing mine with a casual intimacy that made my skin crawl. His smile widened fractionally as he lifted it, the weight of the paper between us. "I'll take a look at this," he said softly, his voice pitched low, as if it were a secret meant only for me. "Maybe tighten it up here and there. You know how important first impressions can be." His eyes were dark, almost gentle, and for a moment, I let myself see him the way I once had. Capable, assured, the kind of man who could make you believe he was on your side. "I know how important first impressions can be," I thought, my lips curving in a small smile that was anything but kind. "Of course, Senior," I said, my tone soft and smooth as glass. "I'm sure you'll find what you're looking for." His brow lifted slightly, the faintest flicker of confusion crossing his face before he smoothed it away. "Always," he said, his voice honey-sweet. He slipped the draft under his arm, his hand brushing against the edge of my desk. "Don't worry. I'll make sure this shines." "You'll make sure it's yours," I thought, the words cold in the quiet of my mind. My pulse was steady, each beat a drum of certainty beneath my skin. I let the silence stretch between us, my stillness a mirror to the calm mask he wore so effortlessly. He lingered a moment longer, his eyes searching mine for something he couldn't name. Then he turned away, the crisp lines of his shirt catching the light as he moved. The door closed softly behind him, the sound a final exhale of breath I hadn't known I was holding. I sat there for a long moment, my hands resting on the desk, the weight of the real proposal solid beneath my fingertips. The office was still, the early light creeping across the floor in slow, golden pools. I let the quiet fill me, let it settle the last trembling edges of doubt that clung to my ribs. This time, I will not be the girl who waited for someone to see her. I will be the woman who writes her own story. My reflection in the dark window met my gaze. Eyes no longer wide, but focused. The taste of fear was gone, replaced by something sharper. Something that tasted like freedom. Outside, the city was waking. The sound of traffic drifted up through the glass, a distant murmur of life and motion. I watched the sky lighten by slow degrees, the darkness giving way to the pale promise of dawn. It felt like a promise, like the world was opening its eyes with me. I closed the real draft, slipping it into the folder that had once held only my doubts. My fingers brushed the paper, a soft, deliberate gesture that felt like a vow. I would not let him steal it again. My future was written in these lines. This time, every word was mine. As I rose from my seat, I caught a glimpse of myself in the glass, a woman no longer content to stand in the shadows. The quiet was still, but it was no longer empty. It was waiting. I walked to the window and pressed my palm against the glass, the city's lights flickering like small, stubborn flames. This is where it begins. My lips parted, a whisper of breath against the cold surface. This time, no one rewrites my story but me. The first rays of dawn filtered through the office windows, glancing off the glass and casting long shadows across the floor. My reflection in the dark pane still held that quiet certainty, a calm I had never known in my first life. As I stepped away from the window, my mind was already turning, the edges of my thoughts sharp and focused. I knew I couldn't do this alone. The break room was nearly empty, the soft hum of the vending machine the only sound in the quiet. Seokmin-ju stood by the counter, his shoulders slightly hunched as he poured a cup of instant coffee. His movements were careful, precise, an echo of his gentle nature. He didn't see me at first, his eyes fixed on the slow swirl of steam that rose from his cup. I watched him for a moment, letting the silence between us stretch like a held breath. His hair was mussed, dark strands falling across his forehead in a way that softened the sharp line of his jaw. There had always been a kindness to him, something that had once made me believe he was safe. In the past, that kindness had been no shield against his fear. I remembered the way he had looked at me in those final days. Apologetic, his eyes heavy with a guilt he never voiced. When he looked up and saw me, his breath caught, the faint clink of his spoon against the ceramic cup the only sound. His eyes widened slightly, a flicker of something unspoken passing between us. "Yuna," he said, his voice low and uncertain. "You're here early." I stepped into the room, the soft click of my heels against the tile, measured and sure. My hand brushed against the edge of the table as I moved closer, every movement deliberate. "I needed some quiet," I said, my tone calm. "Sometimes the early hours are the only time you can hear yourself think." He nodded, his fingers tightening around the cup as if it were an anchor. "Yeah," he murmured, his gaze dropping for a moment. "I know what you mean." The silence between us was heavy, filled with all the things we had never said. I let it stretch, the weight of it a test neither of us could ignore. He remembers, I thought, studying the lines of tension in his shoulders, the way his thumb traced the rim of the cup in small, nervous circles. I reached into the folder I carried, the paper cool and smooth against my fingertips. My heart was steady, each beat deliberate as I pulled out a single page. I held it out to him, the gesture simple, but my hand felt heavy with the weight of all it meant. "Seokmin," I said softly, my voice low. "I need you to see this." His brow furrowed as he looked at the page, his eyes moving from my face to the crisp black text. He took it from me with a careful touch, as if afraid it might shatter in his hands. His gaze flicked back to mine, searching for something he hadn't yet found. "What is this?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. The truth, I said quietly. The real proposal, the one he will never see. My voice didn't waver, though my heart felt like it might fracture from the force of it. I will not let this slip away again. He read in silence, the only sound the soft rustle of paper as he turned the page. I watched the way his fingers trembled, the small crease between his brows deepening as he read. Each line was a blade, every word a testament to the woman I had chosen to be this time. When he finally looked up, his eyes were wide, his breath catching in his throat. This is... His voice cracked, the words splintering in the quiet. Yuna, this is... incredible. His fingers tightened around the paper, the edges creasing beneath his grip. Are you sure you want me to see this? To trust me with it? I met his gaze without flinching, my voice low and sure. I don't need promises, I said, each word deliberate. I need allies who regret their silence as much as I regret my trust. My reflection in his eyes was steady, the lines of my face sharp with determination. I will not beg for loyalty. I will only show them the truth. He swallowed hard, his Adam's apple bobbing in his throat. I should have spoken up last time, he said, his voice rough with memory. I saw what he did and His voice faltered, his shoulders tightening as if to brace against the weight of his own guilt. I won't stay silent again. The break room felt smaller, the air thick with the unspoken truths that clung to every breath. I stepped closer, the faint scent of stale coffee and the clean metallic tang of determination hanging between us. Then help me build it right, this time, I said, my voice soft but unyielding. We both know what happens if we don't. He looked down at the page in his hands, his fingers brushing over the words like a vow. When he met my gaze again, there was something in his eyes I hadn't seen before, something fierce and unbreakable. I'll help you, he said, his voice quiet but resolute. I won't let him do it again. In that moment, I saw not the timid man who had once looked away, but an ally, someone whose fear had been burned away by the same fire that had forged my resolve. My lips curved in a small smile, though it didn't reach my eyes. Good, I said softly. Then let's begin. The silence that followed was not empty, but full, of understanding, of shared purpose, of the quiet promise that this time would be different. Outside, the city was waking, the faint glow of morning pressing against the windows. In that light, we stood together, the first lines of an alliance that had been written in the quiet spaces of our regrets. I watched him slip the page into his jacket pocket, his movements careful and deliberate. The soft click of the coffee machine broke the hush, a quiet punctuation to the new beginning that had taken shape in the space between us. As he turned to leave, his eyes met mine one last time, the faintest flicker of a smile ghosting across his lips. The break room door swung shut behind him, and I let out a slow breath, my fingers curling around the edge of the table. This is only the beginning, I thought, the quiet certainty of it steady in my chest. This time, I will not stand alone. The faint scent of coffee lingered in the air, sharp and warm. I let it fill my senses, a small, grounding comfort in the shifting world around me. My reflection in the glass door was clear, the woman I saw there no longer waiting to be saved. My lips parted in a whisper, a quiet promise to the woman I had once been. This time, we will not be broken. The break room door swung shut behind Seokmin, the quiet thud of it a punctuation to the promise we had forged. I stood alone for a moment longer, letting the stillness settle around me like a second skin. My heart was steady, each beat a measured echo of the resolve I had claimed as my own. I knew what needed to come next. The morning meeting was already in motion when I stepped into the glass-walled conference room. The space was flooded with light, the long table polished to a quiet gleam. Around it, familiar faces, colleagues who wore their ambition like a badge, their eyes bright and hungry. At the head of the table, Ji Woo-min sat with his hands folded neatly, his expression carved from calm detachment. His eyes lifted when I entered, a fleeting glance that flickered over me like the briefest brush of a hand. I met that gaze squarely, feeling the weight of it settle on my shoulders like a silent challenge. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him with the same precision as his words, the starched white collar a crisp line against the clean lines of his jaw. His hair was dark, swept back with a discipline that mirrored the careful control in his posture. I took my seat, my back straight, my shoulders squared. Across the table, Hanuel leaned back in his chair, his fingers tapping a slow rhythm against the wood. His smile was easy, practiced, a performance for an audience that had never questioned the script. He didn't look at me, though I could feel his amusement like a thread of smoke in the air. Jiwoo's voice broke the quiet murmur of the room, low and measured. "Let's begin," he said, his tone devoid of inflection. He didn't waste words, didn't offer the polite warmth others might have. He moved through the meeting with the same calm authority, his eyes flicking from speaker to speaker with a focus that never wavered. I watched him closely, studying the way his brow furrowed when data was vague, the subtle shift of his lips when a pitch leaned too heavily on performance and not enough on substance. He didn't move often, but when he did, when his fingers drummed once against the table or his gaze shifted to fix on a single face, it was like the quiet crack of thunder in a summer sky. Hanula spoke with the same fluid confidence I remembered, his words polished smooth. He used sweeping gestures, his tone warm and inclusive, weaving promises of innovation and synergy in the air like smoke. Jiwoo listened in silence, his expression unreadable. His fingers toyed with the cap of his pen, the small, precise movement a rhythm that spoke of impatience masked as stillness. When it was my turn to speak, I felt the weight of the room shift. My breath was calm, the cadence of my words even. I didn't try to match Hanul's easy charm. I let the data speak, the numbers cutting through the air with the sharpness of a blade honed on truth. Jiwoo's eyes lifted to meet mine, and in that moment, I saw the first flicker of curiosity in the calm depths of his gaze. When the meeting ended, the others began to file out, their chatter a low murmur that receded like the tide. Hanul paused by the door, his smile easy and bright as he offered Jiwoo a final word. "Let me know if you'd like me to refine those projections," he said, his tone warm. Jiwoo's gaze didn't waver. "I'll think about it," he replied, his voice a soft steel that left no room for misinterpretation. Hanul's smile faltered, though only for a moment. He nodded once, then slipped from the room, leaving the air in his wake quieter, somehow heavier. I rose from my chair, the folder of data still in my hands. Jiwoo's eyes met mine across the empty table, and for a moment, the world fell into a hush that felt both weightless and heavy. I let the silence linger, the unspoken tension between us a thread pulled taut. "I'd like a moment of your time," I said, my voice calm. I didn't phrase it as a request, though my tone was soft. His brow lifted fractionally, the smallest shift that felt like a door opening. He leaned back in his chair, the slow movement a study in measured grace. "Very well," he said, his tone mild. He gestured with a small tilt of his head. "My office." The walk to his office felt like a quiet march, the soft hush of the corridor punctuated only by the distant murmur of the city waking beyond the glass. His office was bathed in morning light, the windows opening out onto the skyline in a sweep of silver and steel. He closed the door behind us with a soft click, the hush that followed intimate in its finality. He moved to stand by the window, his back straight, hands folded loosely behind him. "What is it you wanted to show me?" he asked, his tone even. I stepped forward, the file in my hands cool and heavy. "I believe there's more to the proposal than what you were shown this morning," I said quietly. My voice didn't tremble. "I'd like you to see the real data." His eyes shifted to me, and I saw the faintest flicker of something... curiosity, perhaps, or a challenge? "You're certain of this?" he asked, his voice soft. I met that quiet gaze without flinching. "I won't let your cold eyes make me doubt what I've rebuilt," I thought, my breath a steady rhythm in my chest. Aloud, I said, "I've already lived the consequences of staying silent." He didn't answer at first, his gaze steady and unblinking. The silence stretched between us, the quiet hum of the city beyond the glass the only sound. Then, he moved forward, his steps deliberate, each footfall a soft punctuation in the hush of the room. He took the file from my hands, his fingers brushing mine with a touch that was as fleeting as it was deliberate. He flipped it open, his eyes scanning the numbers, the lines of text that held every truth I had forged from the wreckage of my past life. His brow furrowed, the faint line between his eyes deepening. "You've given me something I haven't seen in a long time," he said, finally, his voice low. "I won't forget that." I let a small smile curve my lips, though it was quiet, almost sad in its certainty. "Neither will I," replied, my voice a soft promise. He didn't return the smile. He closed the file slowly, the soft click of the clasp final in the hush. "I'll think about it," he said again, the words quiet, but in the measured weight of them I heard something more, a door left open, a possibility unspoken. I watched him as he turned away, his profile caught in the pale light that spilled across the glass. My heart was calm, each breath a quiet echo of the certainty that thrummed beneath my skin. I had seen the crack in his polite detachment, the faint shift of his gaze that told me he had seen the truth in my words. As I stepped back into the corridor, the door closing softly behind me, I let the hush of the office settle around me like a promise. My reflection in the glass caught my eye. Eyes clear, shoulders squared. This was the beginning of something new, something built not on borrowed words or empty promises, but on the quiet strength of a truth that would not be stolen. The quiet of the corridor was a thin veneer, a silence that felt more like held breath than calm. My footsteps echoed against the polished floor as I moved past glass panels that shimmered with the first hint of dusk. The day had shifted, the golden light turning to amber, softening the edges of the office into a world that felt suspended in time. I could still feel the weight of Jiwoo's gaze in my thoughts, the quiet finality of his words. "I'll think about it." They pulsed in my mind like a heartbeat, steady and certain. He's seen me now, I thought. The certainty of it, a quiet comfort that wrapped around my spine like steel. Yet beneath that certainty was a current of unease, a tension that coiled low in my stomach. I knew Hanyul would not let this stand. His pride was a quiet, ravenous thing, and I could feel its edges pressing into the corners of the office like a shadow that refused to be banished. I moved through the hallways with measured steps, each breath drawn slow and deep. When I reached the stairwell, the hush of the office gave way to the echo of voices. Low, urgent, words that fell into the air like quiet threats. I stopped at the landing, the cool metal of the railing beneath my fingertips grounding me in the moment. The stairwell was bathed in a half-light that caught the lines of Sukmin's face as he stood pressed against the wall, his shoulders taut with the weight of the confrontation. Hanyul loomed over him, his hand braced against the railing, the light catching the fine fabric of his tailored shirt. His voice was soft, almost gentle, each word a quiet blade. "You're smarter than this, Sukmin," he murmured, his tone laced with false concern. "Think of your career. Do you really want to be caught up in whatever Yuna is doing?" Sukmin's eyes darted up to meet Hanyul's, his breath shallow in the close air. His lips parted, the words caught on the cusp of a question he was afraid to voice. I saw the way his fingers curled into fists at his sides, the tremor in his shoulders. He's remembering, I thought, the memory of his silence in another life flickering in the depths of his gaze. Hanyul leaned closer, his shadow falling across Sukmin's face. "She's not like us," he said, his voice pitched low, a coaxing whisper that threaded itself into the quiet. "She doesn't understand the way this world works. You'll ruin everything you've worked for." Sukmin's jaw clenched, his breath a slow exhale that trembled at the edges. "She's trying to make something real," he said, his voice rough. "Something that matters?" Hanul's smile curved, thin and precise. "Something that will destroy her and anyone foolish enough to stand with her," he said softly. His hand lifted, his fingers brushing against Sukmin's shoulder in a gesture that was almost tender. "You don't have to let her pull you under." From the shadows, I watched the moment hang between them. Sukmin's silence, a breath held too long, the weight of it pressing against my ribs. My own heartbeat quickened, a steady thrum that echoed in the quiet of the stairwell. This is his choice, I thought, my fingers tightening around the cool metal rail. I can't speak for him, he has to find his own voice. Seokmin's eyes flickered, his lips parting around a breath that seemed to catch in his throat. I should have spoken up last time, he said finally, his voice low and ragged. His shoulders straightened, the faint sheen of sweat on his brow catching the dying light. I saw what you did to her, and I didn't say a word. Hanyul's smile faltered, a flicker of something that might have been irritation shadowing his gaze. You're making a mistake, he said, the words slipping from his mouth like silk. She'll drag you down with her. Seokmin's breath shuddered, his chest rising and falling in slow, deliberate rhythm. I'd rather stand with her than stay silent, he said, the words quiet but unbreakable. His voice held no defiance, only a quiet finality that cut through the air like glass. Hanul's eyes narrowed, the smooth lines of his expression cracking at the edges. His fingers fell away from Seokmin's shoulder, the brief contact gone as quickly as it had come. The silence that followed was a hush that seemed to stretch, each breath measured and taut. From the shadows, I felt a quiet swell of something fierce and fragile, a pride that settled in my chest like a flame. This time, I'm not the only one rewriting the ending. My lips curved in a faint smile, though the tension in my shoulders didn't ease. He's choosing to stand. That's enough. Hananyul's voice dropped, the smooth cadence of it turning brittle. You'll regret this, he said, the threat soft, almost an afterthought. Don't say I didn't warn you. Seokmin didn't flinch. His eyes met Hanul's steadily, the line of his jaw set with a resolve that had once been hidden beneath fear. I'd rather regret that than regret staying silent, he said softly. The words settled into the hush, each one a small defiance that shifted the balance between them. Hanul's gaze lingered for a moment longer, the silence between them a final breath before he turned away. The soft echo of his footsteps on the stairs was the only sound as he disappeared into the shadows below. Seokmin stood for a long moment, his hands still clenched at his sides. I watched him from the landing, my breath held in the quiet as he let his shoulders ease, the tension bleeding away like a slow exhale. When he finally looked up, his eyes caught mine in the half-light. His expression was open, unguarded, something raw and honest in the soft lines of his face. He knows I saw, I thought, my heart steady in my chest. He knows he's not alone. I stepped back from the stairwell, the hush of the hallway wrapping around me like a promise. My reflection in the glass was clear, eyes bright, lips set in a small, quiet smile. This is how it begins, I thought, each word a quiet vow that pulsed with the beat of my heart. This time, I am not alone. This time, I will not fall. As I turned away from the stairwell, the city beyond the glass seemed to glow brighter, the lights flickering like distant stars. In the soft hush of the office, I let the promise of that light settle into my bones, a steady, quiet fire that would carry me through the nights yet to come. The air in the boardroom was thick with the hush of anticipation, the quiet murmur of polite conversation masking the sharper edge of expectation beneath. Sunlight slanted through the tall windows, throwing pale gold across the polished wood of the table, the soft gleam of metal and glass a cool backdrop to the quiet storm that churned beneath the calm. I stood at the back of the room, my posture straight, hands folded carefully in front of me. My reflection in the glass wall was steady, a woman who no longer flinched beneath the weight of stolen words. My pulse was calm, each beat a deliberate rhythm that steadied the tremor that had once lived beneath my skin. Hanyul moved at the head of the table with the same effortless charm he had always worn like a second skin. His hair was perfectly styled, the crisp lines of his suit immaculate, every movement of his hands measured and precise as he spoke, in that warm, polished tone that had once silenced every question. He presented the proposal with easy confidence, each word rolling off his tongue as if he had crafted them himself. He was a performer, every gesture a practiced note in a song he had sung 100 times before. His fingers moved across the screen as he projected the data. My data, stripped of its soul and reshaped into a hollow echo of what I had built. My eyes watched every flick of his wrist, the faint smile that curved his lips, the gleam of satisfaction in his gaze. I let the silence of the room fill me, the measured calm of Ji Woo-min's presence at the head of the table a quiet anchor in the storm. His expression was unreadable, his gaze sharp beneath the polished calm of his demeanor. His suit was a muted charcoal, the white of his shirt crisp beneath the pale light, every line of him carved from a discipline that was as cold as it was precise. I watched the room, the faint shifting of shoulders as the board members leaned forward, the soft scrape of pens against paper as they took notes. My breath was a steady rhythm, each inhale a quiet reminder of the promise I had made to myself. I will not stand in the shadows again. Hanyul's voice rose in gentle crescendos, weaving projections and promises in the air like silk threads. His eyes met Ji-woo's with the easy confidence of a man who had never been challenged, the faint curve of his lips a quiet assertion of his place at the table. "This proposal," he said softly, "represents the future of this company, an opportunity to redefine what we stand for." Jiwoo's gaze was steady, his fingers drumming once against the table, a single measured beat. "An opportunity," he echoed softly, his tone mild. His eyes lifted to meet Hanil's, and in that brief pause, the room seemed to hold its breath. "Tell me," he said, his voice as calm as a blade's edge, "how do you account for the gap in the third quarter projections?" Hanyul's smile faltered for the briefest instant, a flicker in the smooth mask of his composure. "The market is always in flux," he said, his tone warm, the words smooth and practiced. "It's natural for there to be fluctuations." Jiwoo's fingers stilled, the quiet click of the pen he held against the table loud in the hush that followed. "Your answers," he said, his voice cold as winter light, "don't match the questions, Hanenol." The words fell into the quiet with the weight of a stone, and for a moment, the only sound was the faint rustle of paper as the board members shifted, their eyes flicking between them. My breath caught, the air in my lungs sharp with the cold clarity of the moment. "He sees it," I thought, my pulse a steady drumbeat in my chest. "He sees through the veneer." Haniyul's jaw tightened, the faint tremor of his fingers a crack in the perfect stillness of his performance. His smile slipped, the easy charm of his voice turning brittle at the edges. "I think," he said, his tone a quiet threat wrapped in velvet, "you're misreading the data." Jiwoo's gaze didn't waver, the faintest arch of his brow a silent challenge. "Am I?" he asked softly. The question was as precise as a blade, each word measured, deliberate. His eyes flicked past Hanyul, settling on me with the weight of a quiet command. "Yuna," he said, his voice even. "Would you care to clarify?" The air in the room shifted, every breath held in that stillness as I stepped forward. My heartbeat was calm, every step a deliberate choice that echoed in the quiet. My fingers brushed against the edge of the table as I met Jiwoo's gaze, the calm certainty in his eyes a mirror to the resolve that had carried me this far. "I would," I said, my voice soft, unwavering. The words tasted of quiet power, each one shaped by the fire that had once been nothing but ash. Because the real numbers tell a very different story. Panula's breath caught, a sharp inhale that broke the hush. "This is absurd," he said, his voice rising, the edge of panic bright in the smoothness of his tone. "She's just—" I turned to him, my eyes steady, my voice a quiet blade that cut through the last of his illusions. "I'm done being just anything," I said softly. "Your answers never matched the questions because you never understood the work you tried to steal." The silence that followed was a hush that seemed to stretch into forever, the faint hum of the city beyond the glass the only sound in the quiet. My reflection in the polished table was clear. Shoulders straight, gaze steady. Hanil's face had gone pale, the mask of his confidence cracked and broken. Jiwoo's voice was calm as he leaned back in his chair, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. "Thank you, Yuna," he said softly, the faintest flicker of something like respect in his eyes. "Please, continue." I let my breath fill the quiet, the weight of the moment settling around me like a cloak. My voice was calm as I began to speak, the numbers and projections spilling from my lips with a quiet certainty that left no room for doubt. Each word was a promise, each breath a quiet vow that this time the truth would not be stolen. Hanyul's eyes flickered, his shoulders tight with the strain of a man who had once held everything in his hands and now found them empty. The faint tremor of his jaw was the only sign of the unraveling beneath the smooth lines of his suit. The room held its breath as I spoke, the soft rustle of paper and the measured rhythm of my voice, the only sounds in the hush. When I finished, Jiwoo's gaze met mine, the quiet weight of it a promise that needed no words. In that stillness, I felt the quiet triumph that pulsed beneath my skin, the soft exhale of breath that tasted of something like freedom. My heart was steady, my voice calm, and as I met Hanael's gaze one final time, I saw the truth in his eyes. He had never understood the strength of the quiet mind he had once tried to erase. The room was a study in hushed stillness, each breath a quiet echo against the polished glass and gleaming wood. My voice had settled into the air like a gentle tide, leaving behind a calm so absolute it felt almost fragile. The last of the data still shimmered on the screen behind me, a testament to a story that could no longer be denied. Hanael stood at the head of the table, his hands splayed against the smooth surface, knuckles white beneath the strain. His lips were parted, the edges of his breath catching as he searched for words that would not come. His eyes darted from face to face, the easy charm that had always curved his mouth now a hollow mask that cracked at the edges. He tried to speak, his voice rising in a desperate hush. "This is nonsense," he said, though the words tasted thin in the heavy air. "She's twisting the facts, manipulating the data." Jiwoo's gaze was unflinching, the calm precision of his posture a silent judgment that cut deeper than any raised voice. His fingers drummed once, a single sound that seemed to fill the quiet. "Your words," he said, his tones soft as ice, "don't match the facts." Hanael's mouth opened, closed, the muscles in his jaw working with the effort of holding back the panic that had begun to flicker in the depths of his eyes. "You're being misled," he said, his voice shaking around the brittle edges of his calm. "You know me." Jiwoo leaned back in his chair, his expression smooth as stone. "I do," he said quietly. "I know what I'm seeing now." I watched Hanael's shoulders tighten, the crisp lines of his suit turning into a cage around the frantic tension in his limbs. His fingers drummed once against the table, a rapid staccato that broke the hush in a flurry of sound. His eyes found mine across the room, and for a breath I saw the flicker of recognition, the unspoken realization that this moment had never belonged to him. He took a step forward, his voice rising, a sharpness to it that scraped at the calm. "You can't let her do this," he said, his tone a quiet plea wrapped in a frantic hush. "She's just—" "I'm done being just anything," I said softly, my voice a whisper that cut through the final threads of his control. My gaze was steady, the quiet weight of my resolve filling the hush between us like the first breath after a storm. "This is the end of your story, not mine." The words seemed to catch him like a hand around his throat, his face drained of color, the faint sheen of sweat on his brow catching the light as he struggled to find a foothold in the shifting ground beneath him. His lips moved, soundless at first, then his voice broke free in a raw, hoarse plea. "You can't do this," he said, his tones splintering under the weight of the silence. "You can't erase me." Jiwoo rose from his chair in a single, measured movement, the quiet strength of it filling the room like the closing of a door. His eyes were steady, the calm of his expression unbroken. "I've seen enough," he said, each word deliberate, final. His voice was a quiet blade that cut through the last of Hanael's illusions. "You're dismissed, Hanael. Your future here ends today." The words fell into the silence with the weight of an ending. Hanri's breath caught in his throat, the faint tremor in his shoulders the only sign of the unraveling that had begun to show in the lines of his face. His hands fell away from the table, fingers curling against the air as if he could hold onto something that had already slipped through his grasp. He took a single step back, the soft scuff of his shoes on the polished floor a fragile sound in the hush. His eyes found mine once more, the frantic edge of his breath a quiet plea he didn't dare voice. "You stole so much from me," I thought, the calm of it a quiet echo in the steady beat of my heart. "This time, I am the one who writes the ending." I said nothing as the security officer stepped forward, his posture calm, his hand resting lightly at his side. The quiet shuffle of feet on the carpet was the only sound as he moved to Hanil's side, his presence a silent finality that needed no words. Annual turned to Ji-woo, his voice breaking on a hoarse, desperate whisper. "You can't." I already did, I thought. The final exhale of relief that settled deep in my chest. My eyes met his across the distance, the quiet finality of my gaze the only answer I would give. Ji-woo's expression didn't shift, his calm unbroken. "Escort him out," he said softly, the words a final punctuation to a sentence that had been too long in the making. Haniel's shoulders sagged, the fight draining from him like water slipping through open hands. His steps were slow as he turned, the faint scrape of his shoes against the floor a quiet echo in the hush that filled the room. He didn't look back as he walked away, the door closing softly behind him with the quiet finality of a chapter ending. For a moment, the room held its breath, the hush deep and still. My own breath eased from my chest, the last of the weight that had once pressed against my ribs now lifting like mist in the morning light. My reflection in the polished glass was clear. Eyes steady, shoulders squared. This time, I'm not the one packing boxes. Ji-woo's gaze found mine across the room, the faintest flicker of something that might have been respect in the calm of his expression. His voice was quiet, but in the measured cadence of it, I heard the echo of a promise I had made to myself. "We'll meet tomorrow," he said, the words soft but certain. "There's more to discuss." I inclined my head in a single quiet nod, the calm of my own voice a final echo in the hush. "I'll be ready." As the others began to rise, their voices low and murmured, the last of the tension eased from my shoulders. I watched the city beyond the glass, the lights of the skyline flickering like distant stars against the velvet dusk. My heart was steady, each breath a quiet exhale of promise. This is the ending you tried to steal from me, I thought, the calm of it a soft fire in my chest. This is the ending I wrote with my own hands. I let my eyes close for a moment, the quiet of the room wrapping around me like the final note of a song that had played too long. When I opened them again, the light had shifted, soft and golden, the last of the day's sun spilling across the table in a hush of warmth. Morning light pooled across the marble floors of Ji-woo Min's office, casting long shadows that danced in the quiet space. The scent of fresh coffee lingered in the air, a soft, grounding comfort in the hush of early hours. I stood by the tall windows, my reflection caught in the glass, a silhouette wrapped in calm certainty. My breath felt measured, each inhale a quiet promise that the world I had fought for was finally mine to shape. The memory of the boardroom still flickered in my thoughts. The quiet finality of Ji-woo's voice, the cold precision of each word that had drawn the line between past and present. This is the ending I reclaimed for myself, I thought, the weight of it a soft warmth in my chest. The door clicked open and Ji-woo stepped into the room with the quiet authority that had always been his. His suit was a muted gray, the crisp lines of it sharp against the warm light. His gaze found mine across the room, and for a moment the silence was a breath held too long. He paused by his desk, his eyes steady on mine. "Yuna," he said, his tone no longer cool but measured, each word deliberate and quiet. "You've proven yourself more than once." I inclined my head slightly, the soft curve of my lips a quiet echo of the calm I carried within. "I had to," I said, my voice low, the final echo of every quiet battle I had fought in the shadows. Ji-woo's mouth curved faintly, the smallest shift that softened the sharp line of his jaw. "I want you to lead the new division," he said, his words calm and firm. "You've earned this. Let no one steal it again." For a moment, the world seemed to still, the soft hum of the city beyond the glass the only sound in the quiet. My breath caught, a single exhale that tasted of everything I had buried beneath my skin. Fear, anger, and the quiet triumph that had carried me here. "I won't let anyone steal it," I said, my voice soft but unbreakable. "This time, the future is mine to write." His gaze held mine for a breath longer, the faintest flicker of something like respect in the stillness of his expression. "Good," he said, his tone almost warm. Then begin. He turned away, his footsteps soft on the marble floor as he moved to his desk. I watched the measured grace of his movements, the quiet strength in the set of his shoulders. He sees me now, I thought, the certainty of it a quiet fire in my veins. He sees what I am capable of. I stepped forward, the folder in my hands cool and solid, the weight of it a promise and a final testament to the woman I had chosen to become. The room was still, the soft light painting the glass in warm gold as I crossed to the wide desk that waited for me. My first act as CEO was as deliberate as the calm that settled in my chest. The list of applications waited in the soft glow of the screen, each name a thread in the future I would weave. My finger hovered over the list, the quiet hush of the office, a steady rhythm to my breath. Then I saw it, Haniel's name. A single line of polished words that mirrored the voice he had once used to steal everything I had built. His application was careful, the same easy charm woven into every sentence, the quiet promise of loyalty that tasted of poison. My lips curved in the faintest smile, though it didn't reach my eyes. You never learned, I thought, my breath calm, each heartbeat a soft echo of the strength that had carried me here. You never saw that the only loyalty that matters is the one you build for yourself. I didn't hesitate. My hand moved with the quiet finality of a choice that had already been made. The click of the mouse was a soft punctuation, the single word on the screen flickering like a final verdict. Application rejected. My gaze lingered on the text for a breath, the silence of the room wrapping around me like a hush of finality. My heart was steady, each beat a quiet drum of triumph that needed no words. This time, your name does not belong in my story. I closed the file, the soft click of the lid a final echo in the quiet. My fingers lingered on the cool metal for a moment, each breath a quiet exhale of relief that tasted of something like freedom. The weight of the past had lifted. Each breath a promise that the future would be written in my own words. I rose from the desk, my steps measured and calm as I moved to the window. The city stretched out beneath me, the skyline a quiet testament to the world I had once feared and now claimed as my own. The sun had risen higher, the soft glow of it painting the glass in warm gold. My reflection stared back at me in the glass, eyes clear, shoulders straight, lips curved in a small, calm smile that held no apology. I let the moment settle in my bones, the soft hush of the office a final exhale of everything I had once been and everything I had become. Jiwoo's voice broke the quiet, low and steady behind me. You've built something real here, he said, each word deliberate, the weight of it a quiet blessing. Let it be yours. I turned to meet his gaze, the calm certainty of my voice a quiet promise. It will be, I said, my tone soft but unyielding. This time, no one rewrites my future but me. He inclined his head, the faintest curve of his lips a small echo of the smile I felt deep in my chest. Then he turned away, his footsteps soft on the marble floor as he moved to the door. The hush of the office filled the space he left behind, a final promise that needed no words. I turned back to the window, my breath a quiet exhale that tasted of new beginnings. The city waited beyond the glass, each light a small beacon in the hush of morning. My heart was steady, each beat a soft echo of the truth I'd claimed for myself. This is mine, I thought, my hand pressed lightly against the cool glass. This is the future I wrote with my own hands, the ending I reclaimed from the silence. The last of the morning light slipped across my face, warm and soft against the steady calm of my smile. My reflection was clear, a quiet testament to everything I had fought for. And as I turned from the window, the hush of the office wrapped around me like a final vow. This time, the story was mine alone to write. The door closed softly behind me, the quiet finality of it a single note in the hush. My breath was calm, my heart steady. I stepped into the world I had made, each breath a quiet promise that this time, no one would ever take it from me. In the final reckoning, Yuna didn't just prove herself, she taught us that true power is never loud, never borrowed, but built in the quiet choices we make every single day. Her story is a reminder that no one else gets to finish your sentence. We'd love to hear yours. Share how you're rewriting your own story in the comments below, and let's build a space where quiet victories are never overlooked.